To our first council meeting of governance and strategic planning for 2026. I'm just going to pass over to John for the summons.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members, and Happy New Year as well to all members of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee. You're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of this committee, which will be a hybrid meeting conducted remotely via WebEx and physically here in the Council Chamber in the Guildhall, Tuesday, the 6th of January at 4 o'clock. Alderman Cook. Alderman Hussey.
Aye, online.
Alderman Carrigan.
Online, John.
Councillor Sandra Duffy.
And Shaw.
Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Harkin. Councillor Hart.
Apologies.
Councillor Jackson.
Sure.
Councillor Leonard.
Sure.
Councillor McDade. Councillor McGinley.
Shaw.
Councillor Mooney. Councillor Tierney.
Here.
Councillor Neelis.
Sure.
And Councillor Harkin. Thank you. Thank you, members. Back to you, Chair.
Good. And I would just like to run through the broadcasting statement now. So I would like to remind everyone physically present at this meeting or in attendance remotely that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. A copy of the council privacy notice may be found on the council website www.derrystrabane.com. Okay, and moving forward to declarations of members' interests. Councillor McGinley.
Gormega Chair, just item 6, I'm a member of the board for Shandolans and also for Triax, just to declare that interest. And then item 10, I'm a board member for Foyle Women's Information Network.
Okay, Dinner Biella, anybody else? No. Okay. Okay, so first up today we have our deputations and Boyle and Fulsha, Riv Brian Sinclair, August Peter McClenachan. Brian is the regional manager and Peter is the head of communications and engagements, and they're here from the Northern Ireland Electricity Networks to update members on the big network rebuild. So Mila Fulcherov, you're very welcome here today. We'll just give you 10 minutes presentation, 15 if you need it, and then we'll open it up for questions after, okay?
Thank you, Chair. I'm Peter McClenachan, Head of Communications and Engagement with NIE Networks, and Brian's your local regional manager, appointed in the last few weeks, but has a 34-year background with NIE. So if I can't answer some of your questions after this, hopefully Brian will be able to assist with that. We're also joined in the public gallery by David Grant, who's the Customer Relations Manager for the area, who some of you may know. So NIE have a company strategy about that's focused on delivering a sustainable energy system for all in Northern Ireland. 3 key pillars to that strategy. One is around supporting Northern Ireland government in meeting Northern Ireland's energy needs through the energy strategy. One is around transforming our business to ensure that we can do that. And the third pillar is really our BAU, our day job, about developing a sustainable network. How we talk about that to the public is the big network rebuild. The big network rebuild over the next number of years is going to be a significant investment in Northern Ireland, and Brian's going to chat you through a bit about that investment before I talk to you a little bit about the customer side of things.
Just next slide, please. Afternoon, everyone. So our total network investment for NIE networks over the next 6 years, which has taken us up to 2031, is estimated to be around 2.23 billion. Of that, 250 million is going to be spent on the rebuild of the electricity network. As the graph shows there, the level of work we carried out over the last few years And there's a significant ramp up then over the next 6 years, which is a significant increase in our workload. While this is going to be a lot of work and effort to deliver, the benefits are very wide-reaching. So what will that deliver to the people of Northern Ireland? A more reliable, safer and resilient network, enablement of electrification of heat and transport, and then also enhanced asset management for our own investment decisions that we make internally. So just next slide, please. So to set the context of what that looks like, our network is made up of a distribution and transmission network, voltages ranging from 275,000 volts down to 230, which would be our domestic supply coming into your houses. The 11 kV or 11,000 volt network is the primary voltage that our customers are connected to, and then via the low voltage network. So within the scope of the network rebuild work, some of the aspects that are included there would be pole and conductor replacement, transformer upgrades. Also, the 11 kV work will impact stakeholders, also our customers and businesses. And I'll maybe just go into a wee bit in more detail later on in the presentation regarding that. We have significantly increased our resources alongside our contracting partners as well, who have been ramping up their teams. It's also maybe important to note that about the contracting partners, because a lot of your constituents may see our contracting partner vehicles, RS, Grid Team, Surset, etc., turning up to work on our behalf. So it may not be an NIE vehicle, it may be one of our contracting partners. So it's just good to be aware of that. Next slide then, please. So to future-proof the network and also to minimise disruption to our customers, further works are also planned alongside our network rebuild. These would be works carried out to help increase the load, facilitate connections of LCT, and also we have adapted a policy where possible we're going to touch the network once. So we're going to try and do all of the work at the one time while we're visiting those sites. That work is split across overhead lines, cables, and also an automation program. Now, the automation program is worth noting as it's aimed at helping minimising disruption, particularly to customers during fault situations. So a lot of the storm scenarios that we've had recently, the automation will certainly help reduce the outages. So just next slide, please. And we're just looking here at some of the other major upgrades as well as the rebuild. So I've mentioned already the significant amount of work that's going to be ongoing. Most of that additional work will not require interruptions to our domestic customer and our businesses. Some of that work will include the work to the transmission network, the replacement of fleet and supporting infrastructure around the overhead line network. So next slide, please. This slide, although it may be quite small to see on the screen there, is a significant and interesting slide. It's a high-level forecast around the 11 kV or 11,000 volt circuits that are due to be worked on in 2026. You'll see the blue areas that are marked there indicate the majority of the areas where there's going to be pole and conductor changes. And the smaller circles actually indicate the number of customers that we have affected. And you'll see that in around this region, there are quite a bit of work there on the overhead lines and quite a number of customers affected due to some of that work. Next slide then, please. We do estimate in and around the northwest region somewhat of an investment of 350 million in this area alone. 25 million of that will be worked on the transmission network. The rest of that will be in around our infrastructure, substations, plant, etc. So next slide, please, and this will maybe give us some perspective of the work programmes, two in particular, one in the northwest, which is in the Ballykelly area, and then one in Garva North that are due to start now in 2026. You'll see there that in the Ballykelly area, we have 68 kilometres of overhead line rebuild. Now, teams of 30 to 40 people can refurb somewhere between a kilometre and a kilometre and a half per day. Now, looking at that rebuild in Ballykelly, 68 kilometres, that equates to about roughly 800 poles. So it's a significant piece of work. We do stage our shutdowns, so we're not in week after week or day after day. We do take breaks, give our customers some gaps between our outages and also our landowners as well. But those two projects on themselves are expected to take somewhere between a year and 18 months to deliver. Okay, next slide, please. There are obviously potential disruptions. While rebuilding the network, there are a number of interruptions that we have to take with our customers. Power outages will be necessary to carry out the work safely. Rebuild works often require access to private lands, fields, roadways, so there may be road closures and diversions needing to be put in place. Some of the other concerns are around noise and visual impact, and again, our construction works may generate noise, especially with larger machinery and the amount of work that's being taken place. But some of the mitigation we've put into there recently in terms of even, for example, our chainsaw fleet, we've moved a completely electric fleet of chainsaws. So we've moved away from that noisy engine chainsaw to a completely electric saw to mitigate some of these issues. The rebuild works and vegetation management may also raise concerns among our stakeholders, and then communities may also be concerned around the aesthetics and the new infrastructure and how that looks on our landscape. So just a final slide from me then, please. And we have touched on the fact that people will experience more disruptions, more outages, roadworks, etc. But just some final points maybe from myself on that. Our outage management system, before any work is carried out, we do a detailed circuit analysis. We make plans that are drawn up to effectively minimise the number of outages and the length of outages that we take. We carry out work by a number of methods where we can keep the network live, so we can do live working. We can fit generators to reduce outages, and we can coordinate a lot of our work so that, as I mentioned, touch the network once. We can do the tree cutting, the overhead line work, and any other work on that network at the same time. Some of the safety and access planning issues when we are carrying out work, again, it's planned to minimise the disruptions, not only to the network, but also to the roadways, the traffic management, etc. Environmental considerations we do take on board. We carry out extensive training with our own staff around wildlife awareness and habitat awareness. We work very closely with RSPB and the Northern Ireland Environmental Agency. And we also aim to give back by our tree planting, and a lot of our staff would volunteer for those days as well. For example, last year we planted over 14,000 trees, and this year in the 2026 again we plan to plant 20,000. So again, we're enhancing the environment as we go. We do try to include as much innovation as we can, and again looking at that HV, high voltage generation onto the network to reduce outages, as well as the low voltage generation. And then just our customer and community engagement, and this is a really important aspect that we need to consider and do consider. And maybe to give us more of a focus on that, I'm going to hand back to Peter, who'll give us a bit more detail just on the extensive work that we're doing within that customer engagement. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Yes, so NIE Networks supplies power to 960,000 homes across Northern Ireland. In doing so, we're very much embedded in local communities. We have teams based across Northern Ireland, and we have dedicated people dedicated to the customers who we serve, who are our friends and family and local communities. So we're very much focused on our customers in doing that work. We'll maybe jump on 2 slides if that's okay. So yeah, and in doing so, we have a multi-channel customer service team based out of Craigavon. So if you're engaging with our teams during a storm, for example, it'll be our Craigavon based teams that you'd maybe be engaging with. On more local issues, we're based across Northern Ireland and are based in Campsie, for example, where David is our customer relations manager. You may be directly dealing with those individuals. We've a detailed customer care register, 30,000 customers now on that register who we look to provide additional information and support for during outages and during storms. Move on one more slide then. In our Craigavon headquarters, alongside our customer service team, we have a specific dedicated vulnerable customer team, really passionate bunch of individuals. We're really proud of their work. They've achieved BSI ISO for customer service vulnerability in the last year there. So doing a fantastic job in encouraging the whole business to make sure that we focus on the needs of all our customers, particularly vulnerable customers. Focused on continuous improvement within that and on how we provide support to those vulnerable customers in particular. Moving on another slide then, in relation to the big rebuild in particular, we're very keen to, as Brian said, minimise disruption to customers. And that takes a number of formats. First is reconfiguring the network so that we're taking off as few people from power as possible when we're doing work. At times providing temporary generation so that we can continue to supply people so that they never notice that they're off the main network, but the work is ongoing under temporary generation of electricity. We are getting quite adept at undertaking live line working techniques so that we're doing repairs to the network while the electricity is still flowing. And also carefully scheduling work to make sure that we're avoiding peak usage periods and periods that would most impact customers. Moving on another slide then. That said, we do and we will have to take customers off power in order to do some of this refurbishment work. And when we're doing so, we're committed to keeping people informed. So notifying people in advance through text where we can do it, and notification cards to people's homes, letter drops and information days to people's homes, specific calls to vulnerable customers who we know about to let them know that work will be undergoing in their area, and then also advertising by local social media so that people are well informed of work upcoming. And these sessions like this today, and we're speaking to the different councils across the north, we're doing that purposely to let you know so that you can also let your constituents know, or if constituents are contacting you, that you're informed of that. In instances where, and we'll move on one more slide, where there's recurrent outages because of work ongoing, we will be again taking those steps of notifying people, but potentially also going further, having specific local information events, advising local reps of work ongoing, and then also taking additional internal planning to make sure that we're minimising the disruption for people. We'll move on to the next slide then. In those customer information days, trying our best to make sure that they're well publicised on social media so that people know about them, that people are directly invited to those. And our overall intention here is to acknowledge that there could be at times disruption for people, but to build trust and transparency with people by letting them know in advance and accepting challenge and feedback where it may come. Final slide then is just to note, as I mentioned, that we are based across the north. We have customer relations support in our different local depots with people focused on their different regional areas. So David's here with us today, who works out of Campsie and also works with customers in the Coleraine area. And some of you may also know Helena McElrath, who's based in Oma and Enniskillen, but will service some of the Strabane region of this council area. So that's all from us from now. I'm very happy to take questions. So thank you very much for taking the time to have us here today.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And the first person wanting to speak is Councillor Jackson.
Good Chair, and thanks to Peter and Brian, and David, these are all very welcome to this chamber. And I suppose the first point I wanted to say is that it's welcome investment coming on a critical piece of infrastructure. We all rely on electricity, and I think it's outlined even in your presentation around how more and more people are moving away from almost more traditional methods of energy and moving towards electricity. And that's going to put a strain on the network. So we need DC investment, and we all need energy security. So the investment is much needed, very welcome, and we understand that there's going to be disruption. And I suppose you alluded it there that any power outages are going to be kept to an absolute minimum. But in instances where it is required, they turn properties off. Is there any estimated time frame how long people should be expected their powers to be off, and will they be advised of that well in advance? And I understand that there may be unexpected events that happen that might prolong things, but if there was any sort of indicative time frame where when we know people are going to be off, how long do we expect that power to be off? In relation to the infrastructure, because like we're all aware of the electricity pylons, they're part of our landscape. Is there any indication of what the new infrastructure would look like? Is it similar? Is it a similar scale, similar type, similar size? So if there was a wee bit of information around that, because the pylons, the overhead cables do form part of our landscape. And if we're going to see so many of them replaced within our council area, the new infrastructure is going to form part of a new landscape. So it would be interesting to see what they're going to look like. I'm going to, and I suppose this is my skeptical mind, so apologies if it's away off field, but when we're talking about energy security, and it's well rehearsed, particularly within this chamber, around the energy security across in a more wider context. We're only too familiar around how much energy that's generated here in the West, particularly in the Northwest, and the consumption is largely in the East. So there's a huge imbalance there, where there's a lot of generation here. And whenever you see the term, the big network rebuild, that sounds alarm bells ringing, because surely from our responses to any consultations has always been that it makes more sense they have more energy hungry business relocated to the Northwest, and where the energy is being generated. But can you give any assurances that the big network rebuild that we're discussing here is focused on the consumption here? Are we, is there any prospect that as part of this rebuild, energy is transferred to other parts of the island, where the more energy hungry businesses are located? So it's just a question in relation to that, because it doesn't seem the most efficient way of managing energy. I think that's my cue to bring it in here. Thanks, Jess.
I should have said at the start, we're going to take a few questions and then come back to you, it's okay? So the next indicated speaker is Councillor Riley online.
Thanks, Chair, and Happy New Year to you and the rest of the committee that's there, officers, and obviously those that are coming to do the deputation this afternoon. And can I start by thanking will I try again now, Chair?
Okay, sorry about that. Councillor Riley was just speaking there, so we didn't get to hear what you were saying. Councillor Riley, if you want to come back in,
Oh.
and just to let everybody know, we have quite a few indicated speakers, so we'll take the first three here, and we'll go back, and then we'll come back out to the floor again, okay?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I was just saying at the start to wish everybody a happy new year, and to thank those that have come in to give the deputation here this afternoon. I'm conscious that in some parts of our council area, and I know it was touched on back at a council meeting towards the end of last year, that there was some disruption in I think it was in the Calais area of the council district where our new cemetery was being placed, and concerns around people losing power for upgrades to the network in that location. So that is, I think, had led to, certainly from my point of view, correspondence going off to NIE around the big network rebuilds and what was happening. So I'm really delighted to see the presentation today and the opportunities for people to ask questions and to get an understanding about what the big network rebuild means for people right across this council area in terms of the future investment in the network, but also any disruption that people may have to face during the process of the rebuild. So I suppose it's just to reiterate the points that Councillor Jackson has made in relation to ensuring that people are given adequate notice should there be disruption in their areas. And then I suppose in previous years, especially around this time last year when we had in February the storm Owen that caused significant damage to many parts of Northern Ireland, and a lot of people were left without power for a long time. It's good to see this coming online to try and lead to prevention of that type of disruption going forward. But it is, especially in this weather, in the inclement conditions, we do know that there are always people on standby out doing the work, getting people reconnected in very difficult weather circumstances. So it's just to put on record our thanks to all those crew and staff that are out doing that work at very difficult times and dangerous times of the year. There had been a visit organised for elected members to go out and see and have an understanding about the impact of that type of work, and that might be something that NAE might want to offer again, in terms of the opportunities to see what is happening at Campsie and the work that's there. But Chair, just to really reiterate the fact that if we are going to see disruption, it is crucial that people are given as much advance notice of all of that as possible. Thank you.
Okay, Cormac, Councillor Riley, and we're going to have Councillor Farrell then, and then we're going to go back to yourselves for responses, okay?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks to Brian, Peter and David for coming here today. I would echo the comments from Councillor Jackson and Councillor Riley regarding disruption or expected disruption. There needs to be a really, really strong and clear communications plan to ensure that anybody that is expected to face disruption knows that and it's not coming out of the blue. But in general, I think this is welcome. You're phrasing it as a once in a regeneration rebuild. I've read somewhere that some of the existing infrastructure is there since the 1950s. So it's long overdue. Energy usage, electricity usage across the north has increased significantly since then. So there's more demand, there's more usage. We need more resilient networks. So it's good to see that investment long overdue. I've got one specific question. In the pack, it says about Northwest investment, the 2031, 25 million upgrade for the transmission, etc. It also mentions a public realm scheme. So could you tell us what that is? is it one scheme or is it just works around various substations? So a bit of detail on that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And just back to yourselves then.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to step through a number of those questions, and Brian will maybe jump in and help me out with some of these things. Thinking in relation to, first off, the look and feel of the infrastructure, in reality, the vast majority of customers won't see any difference. This is a refurbishment. So we're restringing overhead lines. We're perhaps replacing transformers, and at times those transformers might be slightly larger than the one that's already on the pole. But for the most part, this won't be visible to the majority of people. This isn't a project where we're putting in new infrastructure. So it will be transformative for people, but it won't transform their view or their landscape or things like that. In relation to energy security and generation and power that's generated in this part of the world, we're very much of the view that we want to support the Northern Ireland Executive, the energy strategy, the Minister for the Economy in delivery of that strategy. And in that, one of the things we're very supportive of is that push for regional balance, because what we understand is that if you're transferring power, that costs money. And in actual fact, where Northern Ireland stands to really gain is by using the energy we're creating in local areas to create local jobs and employment. So we are very much of the opinion that a growth in electricity demand will be hugely beneficial, and it can be very transformative for regions, sub-regions within Northern Ireland. So something we're very supportive of. In recent times, actually, we've seconded one of our team members to work in the Department for the Economy and assist in some of that policy making to help move that energy strategy forward. So something we're very committed to. In relation to the public realm work, my knowledge of the details of that isn't significant. David would be able to tell you afterwards in a bit more detail, but essentially in the last year, I think we've supported public realm work in Derry City here itself, and that has enabled us to upgrade some of the power supply in the city, but also to contribute to the wider public realm work that was ongoing. So that's what that reference is for. My understanding is that the majority of that work is now complete, and hopefully that has had a benefit for the city. But certainly we can provide you more information about that. In relation to informing people on how long people will be off power for, generally what we'll be doing if we're having to take people off power is informing them about 3 weeks in advance. And when we're talking about taking people off power, it's for the day. Generally, you know, it's for the working day, generally after breakfast, but before dinner time, so that people are off for that period of the day to enable us to do the work on the network. What we then do is try to balance that so that we're not taking people off power too many days in 1 month or too many days, you know, in a row, and balance that so that people are both well informed, but they're also not without power for numerous times in a row. Brian, maybe that's something you want to give a bit more detail on.
Yeah, certainly when it comes to disruptions, it's one of the biggest issues we face, and it does certainly need a very detailed and well thought out communications plan. We do have outage times during the winter time, which are shorter outage times than what we do have in the summertime. So we do take that into consideration as well when we have adverse weather like we have at the minute. Again, if it's below 0 degrees for a certain length of time, again, we'll consider cancelling some of those outages and keeping the customers on. So that is something that we do kind of keep as a watch and brief continually. We do as well do quite a lot of local engagement before we go into a certain area. So we engage with the customers there. We find sometimes that when you get the summer months and the more favourable weather, there's crops in the fields and the farmers don't want you. So there's a balance there between disruption to the energy and the disruption to the landowner. But as well as that, some of the customers would prefer being off for 2 days in a row, or maybe 2 days in the 1 week, and then we're not back again for 2 months. Other customers would prefer us to be in there for 1 day a week and then not back for 4 or 5. So again, that local engagement is something that we've become more flexible with, and moving away from the older pattern of planning the shutdown, notifying the customer, and now we start to engage and to listen to what the customer wants. In certain areas it's different, so again we're more flexible in what we do there as far as outage windows and frequency.
And just finally then, I think Councillor Riley had mentioned Storm Éowyn. This rebuild work will help the resilience of the network in relation to that, but we've also other projects ongoing within the business to ensure that we, as much as possible, try to reduce some of the impact that storms have on the network. A major storm like Storm Éowyn will always impact our network, unfortunately. But for example, we've a major focus on additional tree cutting, so that we minimise the disruption that's caused by trees hitting power lines, because that's one of the things that has a significant impact during storms and creates power outages, is tree damage to the network. So that's something else that we're focused on in order to ensure greater resilience of the network going forward.
Okay, our next indicated speaker then is Alderman Kerrigan online.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me in. And as other speakers, I wish us all a very happy new year. And I do thank the speakers for coming in and for presenting to us today. I'll try and be brief. A couple of points there. Staff on the ground, the actual staff that are out on the ground, always first class and always very helpful. And again, the conditions that a lot of those, particularly men out at night trying to get power restored, it's a real effort, and I do thank them very, very, very much, because none of the rest of us really want to be out doing that. And again, it's a credit to them. And I have dealt with, as you mentioned, Helena. I've dealt with Helena before. I haven't always went in my favour, but I have dealt with her before, and she's firm, but she's fair. You just touched very, very briefly on that last point that you've raised in regards to I have a number of wee points here if you want to make a couple of notes here. Tree cutting. I'm assuming due to the power lines, you can go in at any stage in regards to for health and safety grounds, as regards to the like of the farmers there caught and the period of time that they can cut back trees and bushes. I'm assuming there's no restrictions on the NIE networks in regards to when they can come in and cut to clear away potential damage onto lines. So that's one point. Again, touched on it, but you've linked onto it. Not everyone, you have stated in your pack about it's been well publicised on social media, but again, not everyone's on social media, particularly the more senior members of society. That you have 3 points there, or three bits that I'm looking at on your map. I'm assuming you're stated on that sort of more into the northwest there is north of Staban, sort of covering that Dunnamana, Mahermason, Ballymagorry country, approximately 1,500 homes. That'd be covering some of Staban town as well. And then I'm just asking then, going from, because I'm in the lower end of the council area, the Castlereagh and the West Tyrone end, I'm assuming then, is that 1,100 in Omagh town itself? And the other, it states 827. You've been very specific with your number. Is that the wider sort of Carrickmore area, which again is still within the West Tyrone remit? So just confirmation that those are the points, the actual areas. Yes, one here I've just noted here. I'm assuming now, well, you know what you're doing. I'm just wondering there, would there have been much in the lines of an interruption in service to assess what workings you needed to carry out? Is that a case that the power would have been turned off for a period of time for you to assess what works you were doing? Or was that the case, or is that not the case? And has that been completed? So effectively now, any works that you're going to do, if the power's been turned off, it is for the project now that you're stating here. It's not, or is there still assessments that need to be done where you'll have to turn periods of power off in certain areas to assess your next step. And I think my last 2 points then, in regards to future proofing, you know, we do, as has been stated there, we create a lot of power, and particularly I'm thinking in my own DA with the amount of wind turbines and the amount of anaerobic digesters which are within the Castleberg area. You know, the amount of power then that is put back onto the grid. You know, this is all future proofed in regard to that. And if there's potential for additional power sources, should that be additional solar farms or whatever else, you know, this is all going to be set up in such a way that it's future proofed. And one final one, it states in your pack there about your major upgrades, and it says large scale generation and customer connections. I'm just wondering, because I mean planning is delegated to the council, and obviously there's a number of individuals, particularly in the rural area, seeking to build houses in the countryside. Then the connection fees through NIE are considerable. Is this new infrastructure going to leave that any more manageable for individuals seeking to build a house in the countryside, or replace dwellings and having to having upgrade connections, or is there really going to be, are those prices only going to go one way? So that's just a couple of points, but thank you very much, Chair, for letting me in.
Fair be, no problem. And next up we have Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome into the meeting today, all the representatives from NI Electric. My father worked for NI Electric for 25 years, and I run into people now who say, my dad worked for NI Electric and I'm there now, and I've been hearing from people about the new apprenticeship programme as well, and I think that that's to be welcomed. And obviously our electric infrastructure grid needs to be upgraded and completely modernised. I mean, it's dilapidated, if much of it is going back to the 50s, and it's like much of our infrastructure here in the north. It needs to be upgraded completely and modernised, and it's probably costing money to repair on a regular basis. And I want to extend my thanks as well to the NI Electric workers who are out there on a regular basis, making sure homes and businesses, leisure centres all have access to electricity on a regular basis. This is a lot of money. It's a massive operation. It's all over a multi-year period. So you know, that it's hopefully all worthwhile. And I read the goals that you've set out, which is the electrify energy use here in the north to get us away from fossil fuel use, which is one of our council's goals, and obviously it's a goal that's been set out by the Stormont Assembly. And also to get us ready for net zero. So these are all very, very commendable goals, and modernising the electric grid will help us reach that. So, and I think that the work that you're doing to prepare the public and us for possible disruptions, because this is going to be a huge undertaking. I'm glad to see that you're doing that, and hopefully there will be as few disruptions to people's daily lives as possible. But I think that the more work you do to prepare the ground will be very good. I do have a few questions. One is just about data centres or data centres, because in terms of that has been a discussion not just here in the north of Ireland, not just in this council area, but right across the island, where there's been a moratorium, for example, in the Dublin area on the building of more data centres. And data centres consume an enormous amount of energy. And the concern we have in this council area is that there's actually been a lot of council facilitation for non-fossil fuel energy, wind farms and so on, which is great. But if that energy is just going directly into data centres, we're not going to see an impact on people's energy bills for homes or for businesses. So that is a big issue. So how much of this, in terms of the modernisation, in your view, is about preparing the ground for data centres and the direction of travel in terms of where the economy is going and where it's pointed at? And I suppose I would like your views as well on just the whole idea of non-fossil fuel energy consumption, because that is where we need to go. And how do you think this will impact people's bills in terms of, are we going to see more self-sufficiency in terms of our energy needs, and will it be less expensive down the line for people paying what have been exorbitant amounts for their energy in recent years? Thank you.
Carmega, Councillor Harkin. Next up, we have Alderman Cook online.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in, and thanks to NIE for coming along today and taking us through your presentation. I just want to commend you and your teams for all the hard work that you do throughout Northern Ireland all year round. I'm going to have to give credit where it's due. Any time that I've dealt with yourselves or anyone on your teams, they've been very efficient and keep good communication. And the updates, very detailed updates relating to any issues that I've reported. So it's good to hear that during the big network that's the plan as well, because residents will need this continued communication for their area, especially during any planned outages. When it's planned, it's half the battle. So it is a massive piece of work, and I just want to wish you all the very best. And hopefully little disruptions come from it. And lastly, my party colleague, Julie Middleton, she represents the Fahan DEA. She was just wondering what provisions are in place for areas like Brady, Donaghady and Cullion. They're areas who would frequently see power outages on a monthly basis. So thanks again, Chair, for letting me in.
Carmega, Alderman Cook. Okay, we have two more indicated speakers, so I'll just give you the chance to respond to the questions so far before we bring them in, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'll maybe take a couple of the higher level questions, the questions from Councillor Harkin, and then I'll pass over to Brian. In relation to consumption and customer bills and data centres, I guess looking further out, as the public across Northern Ireland begin to use more electricity, naturally you're using more of something, your bill for that specific fuel source will increase. But on the flip side, if you're then using less fossil fuel, you'll be paying less for that. So overall, there should be a balancing out of that bill impact for individuals. Within that, then, the more electricity that's being used globally by all of us, including by data centers, actually means that we're all paying less per unit of electricity. So in fact, if you have a greater demand, including from data centers or from other sources of industry that's bringing additional energy demand, that means that the overall cost of the infrastructure is being spread over more users and more demand, and actually then the unit cost that each individual is paying is that little bit less. So in actual fact, the goal here should be to try to increase electricity demand as much as possible. The network, as we're refurbishing it, will be able to deal with that. And in actual fact, that will be beneficial then because it will bring down the unit cost for individuals. So that is something that we're very keen to see, is actually a growth and a fast growth in electricity demand, because that will actually then bring down that unit cost. In relation to connections, we're very pleased that the Minister announced just before Christmas a change in connection policy. That's been really welcome. That will be really beneficial for people seeking to connect to the electricity network, because it will potentially bring down the cost of connections for some individuals. It'll bring down the cost of connections, particularly where individuals were looking at having to reinforce, pay for the reinforcement costs of parts of the network related to their connection. And what it will do is will socialise that portion of the cost. So rather than that individual paying for both their connection but also the reinforcement of the network back to the local substation or whatever it may be, in actual fact they're then only paying for their direct connection cost, and the wider cost of the reinforcement is being spread over everyone's bills. And that means a very slight bill increase for the wider population, but it's of particular benefit to local businesses and across the north, and particularly in more rural areas where people are facing higher bills to reinforce and connect. It may not bring down bills for connections for smaller domestic homes. It really depends on the individual situation and the level of reinforcement that was going to be charged to that individual. But it's on the whole, it's something we're very supportive of, because it's something that a lot of our stakeholders have been talking to us for a long time about the unfairness of the previous system. So really happy that that's been introduced and will be hopefully in place and applied by our Q2 of next year. Councillor Kerrigan mentioned future proofing, and hopefully I'm addressing some of that in what I'm saying. This big network rebuild is all about future proofing the network. In relation to some of Councillor Kerrigan's other questions about tree cutting and how we assess work, I'll hand over to Brian. What I will say, Councillor Kerrigan's questions about Strabane Town and Councillor Cook's questions about Dunedin, we may not be able to answer in detail today, but certainly we're very happy to come back and provide you more information via David on those specific questions.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Chair. And maybe just before I say anything on those questions, it's really nice, and we do appreciate the comments, around the gratitude shown to our staff, especially during storm, and to hear the good job our ground staff are doing and how they're respected and that. So look, thank you for that. The questions around the tree cutting programme. We do run an annual tree cutting programme, which we do endeavour to cut all of our trees outside of our safety zone to the overhead lines. So effectively running a 5-year cyclic programme, we should be able to cut all of our trees within the closeness to overhead lines outside of the safety zone. Unfortunately, there are times with customer restrictions and so on that we can't get in. And if those trees grow within a certain distance to our overhead lines, then we do have to take outages for that. But we do work on that in a couple of ways. We do have I suppose a customer awareness campaign where we use social media, etc., to make our customers aware of those risks. We also do direct engagement as well with the forestry and with other landowners with high amount of trees around that sort of awareness and educational piece. There was a question there around, is there any restriction? And yes, we do still have to negotiate with the landowner to go in and cut their trees effectively to create the safety distances. But again, that's mostly done through mitigation and agreement with the customer where possible. And it's only on a very rare occasion we would have to force access to go in and cut those trees. So look, that programme running on a 5-year cycle effectively means that we can cut those trees without any disruption to customers and keep them within a manageable distance. The question around doing assessment of the overhead line work and what work needed to be carried out, any of that assessment and planning stage is all done with no interruption to the customer. So all the assessment, the line, the patrols, the work planning, everything is done with the line live. So it's only when we go in to do the actual physical work that we need to do any disruption. There's no investigation work done, which requires the network to be isolated. And then there was those questions around Strabane and the OMA depots, and that map, I suppose, was put up there. It's not a detailed map, but certainly if we needed to get more detail in those areas around Strabane and OMA, we can do that, and we can maybe meet separately around that. But I would say any of that work will be mostly rural. It'll be very unusual that it'll be the towns, OMA town or Strabane town. Those will be the rural areas surrounding those towns. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thanks everybody for their patience and waiting their turn here. But next up we have Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and best wishes to all for the incoming year. And thank you to NIE for the presentation. I suppose listening, a lot of the thoughts that I have already been covered, but I just want clarity. The issue of electricity prices, I mean, we're talking 350 million investment in the Northwest. The money has to come from somewhere, so can it be clarified that this will not have an adverse effect on electricity prices, both for business and for private users within our area? The map that was shown, the 2026 forecast, is a 1-year forecast, I'm assuming. So I presume that over the incoming period, there are 4 other forecasts to come for 27, 28, 29, 31. And I'm particularly interested in specific projects within our district council area. Ballykelly, Garva, I don't care about them. I care about my own particular council area. So if there are specific projects going forward over the 5-year term, can we get some indication of those going forward? And you've mentioned there Staban, Oma. My concern would be into the Castlederrick salient area, and indeed, as has already been mentioned, the Spurn area is there. Do you have any guesstimate of potential energy demand growth, and how that will, is that leading the rebuild project? And if so, the point has already been made about energy production in the western part of Northern Ireland, in our own area in particular, and I totally agree with Councillor Jackson that energy should be used close to source, and I hope that you're emphasising that to the Department for the Economy and indeed Invest NI when this upgrading of the whole system is underway. So local use of produced energy is something that I would certainly hope will be developed. And I suppose a final point, oh sorry, 2 final points. The work that's being undertaken, I think you've suggested it won't be your normal NIE workers who are undertaking this, that it's agency workers. Can you clarify that? Because the question would be, will the work that you are undertaking have any impact on your normal maintenance work or indeed your emergency response work? By the way, and I, like others, commend the staff on that sort of work that they undertake in horrendous conditions. It's to be welcomed. And my final point, the work that's been undertaken, does it integrate with the interconnector system going forward, which I think is something that's to be valued? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Garmargaret, Alderman Hussey and Councillor Logue.
Thank you, Chair, and I just want to say again my thanks to the team for coming to present to Council today, and to thank all the staff for the work that they do in sometimes very hazardous conditions. But I just want to touch on something that has already been mentioned. I think Councillor Riley may have mentioned it, and it's about an area in my own electoral area regarding work that was to be done, I think at the start of January, which hopefully will improve the connection for the residents of Nixon's Corner and the Calais area. As I said, I think that work was to be penciled in for the 3rd of January. But what I would like to know, is there going to be any assessment carried out, hopefully in a year, to assess just has this work been successful? Because I do know that the residents of that area have large scale outages, a lot more than urban areas. And I just want to thank the team and the local team too as well for their very meaningful engagement that I and all our party colleagues had with them during June, July and August time, and especially to thank for this work that has been done in the Calais area. Thank you.
Garmega, Councillor Logue. Okay, we'll go back to yourselves then, and then we do have another 4 indicated speakers after that as well. A lot of interest on this particular subject, so just don't mind bearing with.
Thank you, Chair. I'll maybe answer a couple of Alderman Hussey's questions and then I'll pass over to Brian. In relation to I guess how NIE networks operate. NIE networks is a natural monopoly. There's no sense in having more than one electricity network serving the public in Northern Ireland. So we're a monopoly, and in that regard, then there's a risk that a monopoly company could be overcharging its customers. So in order to make sure that that doesn't happen, we're tightly regulated by the utility regulator for Northern Ireland, and in all this work that we've talked about today, this comes under that umbrella. So in the last number of years, we've been working through business planning with the utility regulator, putting forward a detailed business plan that then they have scrutinised and made a determination on to determine how much money essentially we're allowed to invest in the network and how much we're allowed to charge customers for undertaking that work and for doing that development. The business planning period took a couple of years of detailed work with the regulator, and we're planning for the period 2025 to 2031. So when we talk about what's called a price control and that RP7 price control, it's talking about that period of 2025 to 2031 and a period that we've been scrutinised in significant detail by the independent utility regulator to ensure that the work we're doing is of value to Northern Ireland customers and isn't coming at significant cost to those customers. In relation to that RP7 period, which covers this big rebuild, the regulator in setting that determination has ensured that there's no additional cost on customer bills for the rollout of that work. So significant work, but no additional cost to domestic customer bills as a result of that work. And we work very closely with the regulator in relation to, for example, the tree cutting work we discussed. We work very closely with them as well to make sure that they're content with additional plans for tree cutting and what that means, the benefits that will bring to customers post Storm Éowyn. So we've a good working relationship with the regulator, but naturally they keep us on our toes and absolutely should do that. In relation to energy demand growth then and electricity demand growth, again, that's something that through that RP7, that business planning process, we undertook significant detailed forecasting of what electricity demand would how it would grow over the coming 6 years and beyond, and based a lot of our forecasts on that. And again, that was forecasting that the regulator scrutinised in significant detail to ensure that they were comfortable with that. You also mentioned the interconnector. I presume you're referencing the North-South interconnector. The work on that project is underway, and that will link in with the wider Northern Ireland electricity network infrastructure. And again, that work we've been doing closely in partnership with the utility regulator, with the Department for the Economy, with the system operator for Northern Ireland who operate the electricity transmission system, and then also partners in the south of Ireland, ESB Networks and EirGrid, and that project is ongoing. And yes, we'll connect in with the Northern Ireland electricity network. I think I've answered what I can there. I'll maybe pass over to Brian to to answer some of the other questions.
Yeah, thank you. Regarding the mix of our own NI network staff and contractors, we do rely heavily on our contracting partners, particularly the overhead line aspect. But that does also include our excavation reinstatement contractors, who are also, local companies that we continue to support. But it would just have been impossible for us as an organisation to grow at the rate that we needed to grow and to grow safely all internally. So that contracting partnership is vital to the delivery of the programme as we go forward. Does that have an effect on our business as usual, refurb, our connection work and our fault? No, that all those other aspects of what we do day to day continues. And again, some of that work is delivered by contracting partners, but mostly by our own internal staff. So that will not have an adverse effect on our day to day business as usual. The question regarding Killylay Nixon's Corner, I'm not just too close to all the detail, but I have been informed that work has been completed. And the question there, I think, was, will we assess it again in a year's time? We will continually assess that. We wouldn't leave a situation like that where we would leave it for a period of time and assess it. Our control centre in Craigavon continually monitors fault interruption, transient faults, and the condition and the performance of any piece of the network. So that will be continually monitored. There's been quite a bit of reconfiguration and resupply of that network around that area. So again, that will just be a continual ongoing assessment to see the improvements. And again, that's just something we do with every aspect of the network in every area. So thank you.
Okay, and next up we have Councillor Boggs online. Okay, we'll just give him a chance to come back in there. Councillor Devine.
Graham Chair. I'd just like to thank the team for coming in to present to us today. I think this work's very important, obviously, to build resilience in the network. And I think it's particularly important, I suppose, in rural areas where when there is no electricity or there's an outage, people are particularly vulnerable and isolated. And quite often, as most of you will know, they actually have no means of communication during power outages as well, because they don't have any broadband or mobile signal. So this work's really important. I suppose I think I agree with what Christopher said earlier, and Keith and Derek. The area that I represent, sort of the Castlederg area, is an area where there's a lot of energy generated through wind. And I suppose I'm a bit disappointed not to see any work happening in that area. And I would welcome an update on that at some stage down the line. Obviously not today, but just in terms of what work is going to happen there and at what stage, if that can be communicated at some stage in the future. I would like to know, in terms of your vulnerable customers and your vulnerable customer list, what mitigation measures are you putting in place while you're doing that work to make sure that their needs are being met in any outages? And just in terms of how that work was prioritised, the build and how that's working, was there consideration given to the number of faults maybe in an area, or the number of outages, and how that had an impact on it? I do also actually want to say a thank you as well to all the teams and the crews, and I've been speaking to them on the ground during some of the storms, and they are really doing great work on the ground. And I suppose they're the people as well that sometimes maybe get a bit of the flack when they're out working and people have been without electricity for a period of time. So I do want to pass on my thanks to them as well. And just what I did want to reference was the Economy Minister bringing in the new measures to reduce costs for homeowners and businesses new connections, because I think that again is really important, and you've already referenced that. That's really important for our rural customers. So I suppose just the main question I have is really in relation to vulnerable customers and how they will be looked after in any outages. Gormaigad.
Forever be, and Councillor Boggs thinks he's online now. Apologies, Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. I'm waiting patiently there. I just to follow up from a lot of questions that have been asked by other members. And maybe to sum it up, I would like to ask: has a strategic environmental assessment, including the cumulative impact, been carried out on this big network rebuild program prior to this rollout? Because I think that would be good to see if it is. And if it hasn't, maybe like why not? And maybe it's that it should be, rather than breaking it down into smaller parts, that we've sort of heard today. Particularly like from a councillor that comes from a rural area, it would be good to see. Thank you.
No problem. And Councillor Leonard.
Oh my God, can I hear that? Thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of questions. I also cover a very rural area around Glenelly Valley, and that was badly affected during the last storm. See the new cabling that you'll be putting up, is that going to be heavier cabling? And will the poles that are supporting that, particularly the wooden poles, be stronger? Because I'm thinking of another repeat of that storm again. Is there more chance of them coming down? If you could expand a wee bit on how the automation will help to reduce the faults, particularly in a rural area. And just also like to acknowledge the use of the customer care register during the last storm, and also in the late recovery phase of the last storm, you sent out some of your staff to the local resilience centres, and as I alluded to earlier, we mightn't have got the answers we wanted in terms of time frame, but at least we got a realistic answer, and there was somebody there saying, here, this is the way it is, and they could listen to local people's concerns. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Gormaigad and Councillor McDaid.
Thank you very much, Chair. And you'll actually be glad to hear that my questions already been asked and answered. So I won't add to the list, but thanks for coming on. Thank you.
Okay, Gormaigad. And just I'm going to add in one question at the end here regarding the social value of NIE, and just to see that you're having a 350 million expenditure within the Northwest, and a lot of your work is being contracted. How does NIE monitor the social value of the contractors, and with the customer and the community engagement, how do we make sure that this investment and that money being spent is going back into the communities where the work is being done? That's us.
Thank you, Chair. I'll maybe kick off, answer the questions about vulnerable customers, and then Brian, hand over to yourself. I guess in relation to vulnerable customers, and I mentioned we've a vulnerable customer register now of over 30,000 customers, and we're very keen that if you're aware of people who are vulnerable and maybe aren't on that list, please do inform them of it and get them on the list. In relation to vulnerability, I guess then we would, there's a couple of different aspects to that, and one is the rebuild and how we communicate with vulnerable customers in relation to that type of planned work, and in that regard we're able to undertake additional communication with vulnerable customers on our vulnerable customer list, make contact with them with the details that they provided, so that we're making sure that they're aware of planned outages and the work that's coming ahead of time. And in instances where those individuals perhaps have a vulnerability that means that they need electricity for health reasons. We do have the potential to use additional generation capacity at times where it's available to support those people. So, you know, provide them a generator potentially to their home to provide them electricity while we're undertaking work. And that's something that is effective, and being able to proactively contact customers in that regard is something that we're really pleased to be able to do. In relation to storms, I guess it probably becomes a little bit more difficult because our ability to support a huge number of customers, as has happened in Storm Éowyn, where we've 30,000 vulnerable customers and a huge number of those individuals all looking additional support, it becomes more challenging for us. So again, what we're working to do there in storm scenarios is provide people information in advance of storms, so that they can prepare in their own homes, or prepare if they're aware that there might be a storm impact as to where they can get support. So ensuring that people are well informed in advance, and that in general that we're encouraging individuals to have some level of personal resilience, and also community resilience. And we were hugely grateful to the council here and councils across Northern Ireland for the support you provided in providing those community centres to support people who were off power in difficult situations for prolonged periods of time. We simply, unfortunately, don't have the capacity to be able to provide generators to every individual that needs us during a storm, and that means that at times our vulnerable customer team are having to make quite difficult decisions as to who to prioritise, and because there are people in significant need. And that's where we really value the wider civil contingencies framework set up under the Northern Ireland, it's the Executive Office, which the councils participate in order to support vulnerable customers in particular, and something we continue to support even when there are storms or weather events that don't necessarily affect our network, but affect other partners in that civil contingencies grouping. I wonder then, I think I have probably answered everything on those issues that I can answer. Brian, maybe you want to chat about some of the Councillor Leonard's questions about automation and polls and things like that.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I'm going to try my best and fill in the gaps here as best I can. I may have to hand back to Peter around the question on the social value of contractors and so on. If not, we can come back maybe with an answer later on. Certainly around the prioritization of work, it is something that we do continually. We monitor every single circuit that we have as part of our network management system. We would rank those in order of best performing to worst performing circuits, and we do certainly plan then with our rebuild of targeting those worst performing circuits first as well. Now there are other logistic aspects that we need to take into consideration as well, but certainly the worst performing circuits will be prioritised. Around maybe the communication issue that was raised, certainly in Storm Éowyn, we noticed this very early on. We would have a prioritisation of fault repairs in a storm situation. So significant networks that feed hospitals, interconnecting 33 kV network that backfeeds our own substations, the backbone of our network, as it were. We prioritise those. And then we prioritise hazard and extreme calls where there's a risk to the public and vulnerable customers. But very early on, we did realise with so much of the network out and the communication towers going down, that communication was going to be an issue, and that became very vital early on. And we then had to prioritise those communication towers to get the communication up, not only for our own staff, but also for the public. So again, that's something that we work on continually with those communication providers, that they may consider into the future their own generation, because it may at times just be difficult, because they're normally so rural and on mountaintops. They're very vulnerable as well. So we do continue to engage with them and encourage that. The strategic environment assessment around the entire programme, we do have a sustainability and environment department that would govern our own actions, and also then external governance, looking at our environmental impacts. And yes, we would have an assessment carried out at the design stage. We would also carry out those risk assessments at the planning stage and then also at the work stage. So that environmental assessment is completed at all stages of our work, as well as a high level strategic point of consideration as well. The automation on the network is actually quite something that's been innovative for ourselves. Most of our network has at least 1 or 2 options of resupply. At the minute, those will be done very heavily dependent on our operational staff. So control centre would instruct our operational staff to reconfigure the network manually. That automation now will be built in, that when certain parts of the network fail, that resupply is triggered automatically, and those line switches then come in. So that saves us that time of the engineers having to arrive on site, make their assessments and carry out their switching. So again, it will help that resupply to be more automatic and quicker, and the system then becomes a smarter system and a grid that starts looking for itself. So you take out the human element of failure as well, and the decision making, when all that can be built into a plan. So that's something that we're working on, as well as our rebuild program. That would be something that we'd be looking at, outside of that as a continuation. There are other smart devices that we can fit on the network that senses faults that before they happen, so they predict faults. So on our underground network, we can see when a cable is starting to break down under pressure, and we see spikes in load. So again, we can start to predict faults in the underground system, and actually then proactively find those faults before they materialize into a proper fault. So we can manipulate the network in that sense. So that's just a couple of ways maybe that we're looking at that, and it's all part of developing this smarter grid that thinks for itself and can operate automatically. Peter, do you want to touch on the social value of our contractors and our own staff?
Sure. Yeah, one of the things we've done is in the past year is appointed a new independent challenge group to NIE Networks. That group of 5 independent experts is chaired by Jenny Piper, Dr. Jenny Piper, who's the former chief exec of the utility regulator and former interim head of the civil service. We will be working with that group on consideration of a number of things, and one of the things they've already challenged us on is around social value, and asked us, to begin to quantify that in a bit more detail. We're very confident that we do add significant value to local communities here through the investment we've talked about today, through the jobs we create and are creating through these projects. But what I can't do is give you a detailed quantification of that. But that's work that we've been challenged to undertake and will be undertaken. And when we have a bit further detail on that, we can share that with you.
Thank you. It's just on that, with over 70 million a year in the next 5 years, it would be good to have some tangible KPIs on that, to see where that money is going back into the local community. But listen, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And you're more than welcome to sit on. But I'm sure you have other places to be. So Garmila Mayogov to Peter and David and Brian for coming along today. Okay. Okay, and Boilam Fulcha Okuranish Riv Janet Johnson. Janet, apologies for keeping you so long. Janet is here today to give us an update on the MER Test and Learn pilot. And Janet is going to be doing the presentation online.
Just checking you can all see and hear me.
Yep, all good, Janet.
Super. Thank you very much for the invitation today. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I know you've had a presentation before from colleagues of mine, Joan O'Hara and Nicola Cray, on collaboration test and learn. So I'm just going to recap very quickly what test and learn is about, what we've been doing of late, and then what we're moving ahead to do with now. If I could have the next slide, please. I suppose test and learn came from the acknowledgement that government needs to work smarter, that we're working in silos or duplication in the services that we're offering, as well as gaps. And in a lot of communities, we're spending a significant sum of money, and we're not really seeing the outcomes that we would like for that. And I think that's because we acknowledge also that a lot of issues we're dealing with across our communities don't have a single root cause and won't be solved by a single intervention. So they're more complex and need a more coordinated response. So I suppose that's really why Test and Learn came about. And we also acknowledge as well that the government isn't going to solve this problem by itself, neither is the council. I think we need to work with our communities to come together to deliver what the communities feel is important and what everyone feels will work. Next slide, please. So I think I've touched on this already. The NICS collaboration test and learn is really a collaboration across the community and voluntary sector, local councils and all the NICS departments and a range of agencies and arm's length bodies. We're currently working in 3 pilot areas, and the one that will be relevant to yourselves is the Mirror DEA. And really, just to say again, it's about becoming more than the sum of our parts in terms of what we all deliver. Next slide, please. So we have just finished phase 2, and if you pop on the next slide, I'll talk about what that looks like. Phase 2 has really been about community engagement, and I'm really grateful to all the people of Mirror, particularly the community and voluntary sector, who've been involved in that community engagement process. There have been numerous meetings across a range of themes where the community has really come together to discuss what is important to it, what its priorities are, what its aspirations are. And that process has culminated in the production of, in the case of Mirror and a Mirror investment perspective, akin to a plan. And that's a really valuable document, I think, in terms both of the conversations that went to creating it and in terms of how government then can go forward with a single document setting out the aspirations of the people of Mirror. The phase 2 has been evaluated by Queen's, and that was a very favourable evaluation. And we've now just got approval from the NICS board to go forward with phase 3. So next slide, please. And you can probably just hop through this one that says phase 3. So phase 3 is really about how government comes together now, local and central government comes together to respond to these plans, and it's really about how collaboration will work in practice. It's about how we set up structures that are useful, that make the right decisions and involve the right people in those decisions. And it's also about how we change government practices to make them more efficient. So we are looking at things, particularly to support the community and voluntary sector, about how we commission our services from the community and voluntary sector, how we reduce the bureaucracy in that, how we bring forward a tell us once, supply once approach. So we're not creating a burden on the community and voluntary sector that we know delivers a lot of our services on the ground. And really we want to test our way through this next phase about how collaboration can really work and how those conversations can change and how we can bring government together. So we're doing something a little bit different, I suppose. I think we've got quite good as government in consulting and taking people's views, but this next phase is going to be about delivery and delivering together. And I think that's going to be very, very interesting, I think, going forward. Next slide, please. This slide gives a sense of what we think the structures might be in terms of delivery. I don't want to linger on it too much because, like all of these things, we are testing and learning as we go. We have an executive in place in terms of our senior leadership across the NICS to make sure that we do have engagement and buy-in there. We have formed a strategic partnership which involves the anchor organisations in each of the 3 pilot areas alongside local councils and civil servants from each of the NICS departments. We imagine then that we will set up local partnerships in each of those pilot areas. How they will look, my sense at the minute is that they will vary by council area and by pilot area. I think we don't want to create more duplication and more bureaucracy in the system, so we're keen to use systems and things that are already in place, but equally recognise that in some of those areas there aren't the structures in place already, so we might look to look at how we can put new things in place. In terms of the delivery, and I'll touch on this more when I talk about what the delivery will look like, we imagine that we will take forward a number of pilot delivery projects, and we'll use those to practically test how delivery can work on the ground. And we imagine we're going to need some sort of governance and discussion groups around those. So that's what that lower level of initiative and project group is about. And all of this will be supported by a backbone structure. So that will consist of the anchor organisation that we already have in place. Presently, that's Triax for Moor, and that the anchor organisation will be supported by a government representative. So that's a really close partnership there that will attempt to understand, I suppose, the needs and priorities of the community and of government, and to keep that conversation ongoing, and also of bringing all the right people to the table in all of these other structures so that we have the right conversations and the right people there for them. There are a number of task and finish groups being set up, and those are around some of those things I've talked about already, like the tell us once approach and how we commission our services. And we also are going to look at statistics and how we have a better picture, or we get a better picture of the investment that's been made across government in each of these areas. Next slide, please. Okay, so where we're at now, and I think this is what prompted the invitation to come and talk to the committee today. We have taken the Moor investment prospectus, and we have asked government to respond to that, and that takes each of those asks in the prospectus and asks all of government what it's doing to contribute to it, and does it lead on it, and so on. So that's presently where we're at. We realise that's a significant piece of work, and we have issued templates to all our local government and central government contacts to have these templates filled out. There are 4 parts to the templates and 4 parts to how we're hoping to respond to the prospectus. The first one looks at every individual ask within the plan in terms of the operational involvement of local and central government. I ask them, are they leading, are they contributing, and what they're doing in that area. The second part examines each of the themes. So the Moore Prospectus and the community consultations took place around 7 themes. So things like childcare and young people, the built environment, arts and culture, and so on. And part 2 asks all of the people involved what they feel like collaboration is like across that particular theme. What types of collaboration is already working, what structures are there, how they're performing, and what barriers they're facing to greater collaboration and collective impact there. Part 3 looks to understand where government is funding activities that aren't in the plan, because I suppose that begs the question, why are we doing that if it's not considered important? And part 4 is about testing the concept. So we've asked our anchors and also our government representatives to put forward suggestions for projects or initiatives that could allow us to actually get around the table and deliver something in practice using our new collaborative techniques. And that's really what the template's about. The next slide, please. It's just for questions. If anyone had any questions, I know that was a very quick run through, but that's kind of where we are and where we've been. I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Janet. Or we have Councillor Loco online there wanting to come in.
Thank you, Chair, and hello, Janet. Thank you very much for coming today to present to Council. I have been through this very lengthy document, and at the onset, I just want to thank everyone who took part in putting this document together. Just want to touch on something that you said at the start of your presentation about significant investment already being given by government to this area. And while that is true, I need to say that the outcomes are not what government would expect at this stage. I do have to say that as a resident of the Moore DA, someone who was born, reared my own family in this DA and represented it for the past 20 years, I see the hard work that has gone on the ground and the difference that investment has made. However, with that said, there is a lot more to do. And just going back to the fact that he mentioned that the outcomes aren't just what the government thought, well, maybe I would think that the issues within the Moore DA have been issues that weren't going to be turned around within a 20, 30-year period, given what that community has had to do to get such investment, much needed investment into the area. So I just want to have that on record. I do understand, and I think we all understand for many years now, that joint up working is the way to go. And while there has been a lot of government departments who give a lot to certain areas of work within the Moore DA, there are other departments who see themselves as aloft and being outside that process. But what this piece of work has shown is that we need to carry on with that partnership arrangements to ensure that what has been identified within the plans is carried out. There is one thing I want to ask: have you had any response from the government departments, and is there any evidence of the long-term commitment from these government departments to work more efficiently and strategically with the community and local government partners. I also want to highlight, I suppose something that was missing from the document for me was the lack of mention of cross-border working. We are an area that straddles the border. A lot of the issues, including transport, work, everything, impacts our area, and it does need to have more cross-border collaboration with the government partners in the south too as well. So I would want to see that included within the document, because I do think it's not going to work if we're working here on our own and then leaving a community at the other side just out of the loop, simply because of where they live. And I do think that there needs to be more collaboration with cross-party government partners and councils. But just I would appreciate a wee bit more information if there has been any response from local government partners. Not local government partners, partners in government, the departments in government, and has there been any long-term commitment given? But just to reiterate once again the work that has gone on by all the community groups who took part in this piece of work. Thank you.
Carmarga, Councillor Logue, and Janet, I'm just going to take a few sets of questions before I come back to you, if that's okay. And next indicated speaker is Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Janet for coming along today to present this, what is a very interesting plan for the Mer DEA. I don't represent the Mer area, Janet, but I know it very well, as I was born and raised in it. Still have lots of family who live there. I have to say, throughout the presentation, I found it really, really interesting, and I would agree with Councillor Logue that the Mer DEA that I grew up in is completely different to it is today, and you can see the hard work by local community groups and organisations and residents to try and turn that area around. And it's good to see that a plan like this and a prospectus like this is coming to help those groups and organisations to try and take that another step forward. Reading through it, it is definitely very interesting. I found the SWOT diagram in it, which outlines the benefits and the challenges for the Mer DEA, incredibly interesting. As reading through the document, however, Janet, I didn't see any timeline or lifespan of this prospectus, and I would hope that that's something that you might be able to update us on. In your own remarks, you talked about local and central government coming together, and the next phase being about delivering together. How do you, and I know you talked about the template, but how do you see that role being made up and working together and including the local community in there as well? The template and your description of it talked about the asks of government for each project and what they are doing, who's responsible for it, what they're doing, and who, what funding, for example, has been put aside for it. I know there's no responses or very little responses back yet, if any, but I think that will be incredibly interesting to see across a number of DEAs within this council district to see the priorities for those areas and what central and local government are doing to progress them. You talked about the next stage being about delivery. Has there been or is there likely to be funding set aside for the implementation of this prospectus? And if so, have you got any idea of what that may be or what a cocktail of funding may look like? And you also talked about the long-term government commitment to this area. and this particular, to the three areas, and to the particular plans and prospectuses. And I know that this is further down the road now, but I would be also keen to find out, Janet, how the three pilot areas were selected. Now, this is incredibly welcome for the people of the Moore Ward, and something that we in the SDLP look forward to seeing develop further. But I would just be keen to see, because there's other areas across this district which face similar challenges to the people in the community within the Moore. And if this is a pilot programme and there is a phase 2 of the entire programme, I would just be keen to see what other areas could be selected and what areas were considered across this council district in terms of this pilot project, which the Moore and the other two areas have stepped forward for. But all in all, it's something that I believe is incredibly exciting for that area, and incredibly exciting for the people who live there. And we will certainly do whatever we can to support you in terms of the phase 3 and the further rollout of the projects. But again, thank you very much for coming today to present this, and we look forward to further engagement with you as this project rolls on. Thank you. Our programme rolls on.
Councillor Tierney and Councillor McGinley.
Good Chair, and thank you, Janet, for the presentation. You know, I think this is a really exciting project moving forward for the Moore, as a representative of the area who has also been born and raised there and still lives there. You know, the community and voluntary sector within the Moore are working well outside of what they probably should be doing in order to deliver for people in this area. And I think it's really important that government seem to now have recognised that and are looking to learn from the practices of the community and voluntary sector. I think the important ask, and it's something that Brian touched on there, is that it's well and good to put together a plan. What we need to see is what resources have been committed to the delivery of that plan. And Janet, I'd be keen if you're able to give us any form of update on what resources and funding potentially has been committed at this stage to roll out phase 3. I think it's really important as well that at times, sometimes we see, you know, pilots are rolled out and there's no continuation plan or succession plan for that. Is that the case with this, or is this something that we can expect to see in the long term, that the Executive Office will be looking to roll out across different DEAs as well? But just want to put on record my thanks to the community and voluntary sector who have been the pioneers in leading community development across the Moore and are responsible for the massive development that we've seen throughout my lifetime and others. But just those couple of questions, Janet, which are in a similar vein to others. Thank you.
Councillor McGinley. Janet, I'll bring you back in now just to answer those, and then we have another few indicated speakers after that, okay?
Okay, thank you very much. And first of all, just to say that the Moore Prospectus, I do think it's an excellent document. I could take no credit for it. It comes entirely from the community itself. And I do agree with the sentiments expressed by the councillors that the community and voluntary sector within the Moore and wider are doing an absolutely excellent job. And it's not that, I suppose, government isn't seeing the outcomes that it would like to see. I think we appreciate we need to do better, and we need to do more and work better together if we're going to tackle the more complex problems I think that we're going to need to deal with, to see the changes that we would like to see, that what everybody would like to see. Just to deal with the question around the commitment to it, and is government committed to this? Yes, we have the commitment of the NICS board, so that's the head of all of the NICS departments. This is a initiative primarily about working smarter and how we work and not what we're doing. So it's not about changing policy per se, it's about how government departments and officials actually deliver better with the community. But we do have the full buy-in of the NICS board, and that was recently confirmed at the end of September when they give us their endorsement to move forward to phase 3 of the project and into delivery. In terms of those cross-border elements that Councillor Logue highlighted. We are aware of those. As I say, we are not in government responsible for the production of the Moore prospectus, but I have had conversations with all of the anchor organisations across the pilot areas about that element and the possibility for initiatives in that way and for funding that can be gained in that way. And that brings me on to, I suppose, the question of funding. This is an initiative that is about working better and smarter. It's not about new money. It's about doing better with what we have. The intention is that we reduce those silos and the duplication, and we can become more efficient. And therefore that may free up money that can be reinvested in those areas. But I don't know, it's a disappointing message. There is no additional money set aside for test and learn, and it's really about how we deliver what we're delivering better and refocus any money that we can into doing, I suppose, what the community sees as important. In terms of the timeline of the plan, again, it doesn't probably have one in it because it was produced by the community, but our understanding is that plan is the aspirations over the next 5-year period. The delivery phase of test and learn, we imagine, will take place over the next year or so. And just picking up on one of the other points, there was a question there as well about how we will come together to do the work and whether we've had responses from the government departments. I've had responses from all but 3 of the government departments, and I've had partial responses even from them, and I know they're working on it. I think it's a very, very wide remit contained within the document, and it is taking a while to for them to respond to. And I know the council are considering the document as well. But we have we now have every government department represented on our steering group and strategic partnership. We have had really good engagement at our latest meeting, and we have another cross-department and meeting planned for next week, and the community and the council will be attending that as well. So I would say we are across government bought in, all of us, and we do have that strategic intention to make this work right at the top of the house. How were the pilot areas selected? I think was one of the other questions. Test and Learn started really small in 2023 with just the Diamond super output area and with Auchnacloy, and it was considered, they were selected, I think, around measures of deprivation, and it was decided that those areas were too small, and it was expanded out then to the relevant DEA, again looking at measures around deprivation. I'm just checking I've picked up on all of those questions. So one of the things I've written down here a number of times is really just to say thank you again for the community and voluntary sector and the people of Moore. I really do appreciate the work that's already going on, and none of this is to say that there isn't excellent work going on, because there is. It's about coming together to build on that local knowledge and that delivery experience and working smarter together.
Thanks, Janet. There are a few more speakers wanting to come in here, so if there's anything that you remember that you wanted to say, you can come back in on it.
Sure.
Alderman Hussey online.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Janet. Extremely interesting project, and you've referred to it there yourself. I would congratulate all involved in it. The prospectus is a very comprehensive document and takes time to go through. The whole ethos of partnership, working, collaboration is something that's been in the ether for a long, long time. So I'm sort of echoing some of the previous comments of councillors. Okay, we've got this project. When's it going to materialise? And are the resources going to follow? Now, you've indicated that there's no extra resources, but at the same time, will there be appropriate resources able to be produced from appropriate departments with regard to projects that within the overall prospectus that is looked at there?
Sorry, Alderman Hussey, you've lost your mic there. We can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm not sure where you lost me. Do you want me to start again?
No, sorry, were you finished there at the end? You
No.
asked a question. Did you something else after that?
Yeah, the appropriate resources element, I don't know if you got that or not, coming from not so much additional resources, but appropriate resources from the appropriate sources
Yep,
within
we got
departments
that.
and the acknowledgement of that. And also the savings that can be achieved departmentally by prevention of overlapping. And then the worry of making sure that gaps, are avoided, that there aren't gaps created. I note there that you've referenced to the Athnacloy diamond. I presume that's the Athnacloy rural DEA, as opposed to the urban DEA, which would be the nature of the Moor. I'm not sure, I don't know where the other one is. You said there were 3. I would trust that the pilot is not just that. Pilots are meant to lead on to something else, and not just in the area where the pilot is carried out, but the transfer of that knowledge and expertise then to other areas, other DEAs. And can you outline how that is to be achieved? How are the results of the pilot going to be disseminated throughout Northern Ireland to the various DEAs? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and Councillor Donnelly.
Carmel Chair, thanks for letting me in. Not a member of the committee. Thanks, Janet, for your presentation. I'm going to come at this from a different perspective than my colleagues here. I have been an elected rep for the Moor since its inception. I live in the Moor like Councillor Logue and Councillor McGinley. My children live in the Moor. It's an area that I'm very, very proud of. But however, there's lots of issues going on within the Moor, and many of them are not dealt with within this report. However, saying that, I don't expect them to be dealt within this report. And I would just like to make some comments because, I've asked the questions many times and they've never been addressed, let alone answered. We talk in the report about deep-rooted issues, generational unemployment, lack of access to quality education, and limited community resources. Holy Child School here, up until recently, they still had prefabs that were, children were being educated in, that maybe their parents or grandparents had been educated in. I believe it's an area that suffers from discrimination. There is a SWOT analysis and it talks about the fears and that, but at no stage does it talk about many issues that this community are facing. And one of these issues is the sort of the trauma from the political conflict, the generational trauma, the ongoing political policing, the collective punishment put on this community, the harassment by the British police. I don't expect this report or yourself to have dealt with that. It doesn't deal with the, it talks about the PEL community, and there's many issues within the PEL community, and they're very similar to issues within the nationalist community. Talk about being disenfranchised, the marginalised, and within the political structures. That's not only an issue for the PEL community, but it's a very major issue for many, many people, thousands of people within this Moor ward and indeed throughout the city. They don't believe that, that the political structures are adequate. We also have the issue of a serious issue of gatekeeping. And that gatekeeping leads to inter-community tensions. It's been mentioned. I've mentioned it numerous times. I stood on that ticket in election, and I've been elected for 3 times within the Moor ward. And I think that there's a number of issues where that has really sort of been summarised. We had COVID aid packages, and within that system, there was. It was dealt with within the unionist community. There were separate structures, which I agree with. It makes sense. But within our own community, many people who are marginalised from the political parties or from within that system, there was no effort to facilitate those people. And unfortunately, many, many people within our community lost out. The distribution of that was involved with many people, was top heavy with political parties. And no efforts were ever made to deal with that problem. And these type of problems still exist to this day, and that's the reality within nationalist areas for many, many people. The perception, it mentions in this report, perceptions from unionists that they may not be welcome and that we could remove walls, and yeah, I can understand that. And removing walls, whilst are welcome, it isn't the end of the problem. There's no walls, physical walls within nationalist communities. However, there are major, major barriers. And it's never, ever dealt with because the political system here is ineffective. And in fact, in my opinion, it's part of the problem. Regards gatekeeping, there's independent infrastructure within the Moor ward and within the city in general. And only several weeks ago, there was an attack on an organisation that I'm part of, where the main political party told a lie and tried to withdraw funding from a community organisation. Had that have been achieved, then this organisation would have been closed, and that was based on a lie that was told in council. And at no stage is any of that ever even recognised, let alone addressed within this, as I said, discredited and inadequate political system. And there's a growing disconnect. Now, I don't share the excitement voiced by previous speakers. I believe that it's, there's lots of good stuff in this that has to be, that will help this community, but it won't trickle down. If we have lots of people who don't feel that they can be used to it or can avail of it, then for them it's completely irrelevant. So I don't share that excitement. My time in council, there has never been any meaningful effort to tackle the disconnect. It has been, in my opinion, the opposite. And I believe that the ongoing gatekeeping, which has never been addressed, is fostering division, and that is part of the problem. So apologies, I don't have a question, but I feel that I needed to make them points. Thank you very much.
And next indicated speaker is Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, Janet. And look, Janet, I think it's wrong to start with emphasising government's disappointment at the outcomes, because I believe a lot of the challenges that exist in the Moor, which I'm very familiar with because I live there, are the responsibility of Stormont and are decades long, and that Stormont's policies continue to drive deprivation. A lot of the challenges that we see in the Moor, a lot of the challenges that are mentioned in a very comprehensive report. So I think that that's wrong to basically say we're disappointed at what you've done to address these problems when it's actually the executive and the assembly that is responsible for a lot of them. I also wonder as well that, you know, it's the community and voluntary sector that are at the centre of this, that the government is expecting to basically drive this forward. Now, the community and voluntary sector itself is completely overstretched. It's overburdened. It's under-resourced. Many of the people who work in the community and voluntary sector are surviving on poverty wages at the minute. So it just seems to me that there is very little recognition by government that the more responsibility that they put on the community and voluntary sector, the more they're stretching real people's lives and making it harder for people who live in these communities. Just in the last week, we've had another announcement that good relations funding from the executive office itself is going to be cut. And that's the type of gap I see in terms of like the executive's involvement in this well-intentioned plan. But the reality is, how are all these things going to go forward when there is no anti-poverty strategy coming from the executive? There's actually a disastrous anti-poverty strategy. When there's more cuts for arts and culture coming from the executive, and where the executive isn't able to address health inequalities because they're actually driving up health waiting lists, and the same is true for housing. So I think that the issue here is there's a lot of ambitious stuff in this document, but the problem isn't that. The problem is government's ability to actually properly fund initiatives that will address the issues that are in the Mirror, and also not just in the Mirror, and many other communities right across the north. So a lot of work's been put into this, but look, there's been tremendous work done on many things like the anti-poverty strategy, and when it's actually got the government to actually do something, to fund it, to set targets, it's end up as a disaster. And so, you know, I think that this is a very well-meaning document, but I think that the criticisms that you began with are completely wrong placed. And I think we have to start with a problem. The problem is Stormont, and the problem is decades of underfunding of the Mirror and you know, communities right across the north.
Okay, and the next speaker is Councillor Hutton.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in. I know I'm not a member of committee, but I just wanted to come on here today to listen to the deputation from Janet. And I do have to declare an interest as an employee of a community organisation that was involved in the whole test and learn process in the Moor Ward. But basically, I just wanted to come on here to say about the whole process itself and how I feel that its core principles are actually going to benefit the community as a whole, and not just the Moor Ward. As Councillor Tierney has pointed out, this will be a blueprint for other areas that may benefit from a test and learn process, because you know, the process was a place-based focus on the Moor Ward and address the specific needs that community organisations feel are of the utmost importance and needed addressed at this time. And it's where we have seen gaps within services, where we feel that residents aren't getting the proper services that they need, whether it's through failure of funding, whether it's through services not being able to be provided because of low staffing, etc., etc. There's a lot of stuff that implied that, but you know, the whole process was a co-produced process. The residents, frontline staff were involved in it. It was data informed. And I have to say, the bureaucracy within the process was low. I think bureaucracy within government departments and the community and voluntary sector is it's not great. There's a lot of loops and hurdles that the community and voluntary sector have to jump over in relation to bureaucracy, but there was low bureaucracy through this process where decisions were being made quick, and you know, there were short feedback loops in relation to getting information across. But I think as well, for it to be successful, you know, it did focus on the Moor Ward needs. It did encourage more collaboration at a grassroots level, basically. And then, you know, it was what we did agree was that test solutions had to be tested before they were committed to sort of long-term change or, you know, the use of learning and feedback to adapt needs within a real time. But I know there have been negative comments made here today, and everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But this is an ongoing journey. And it's really, really evident from the documents that have been produced, from the outcomes that have been produced, that the community voice was at the heart of it. And once you have the community voice at the heart of any process, then you're dealing with issues at a grassroots level. And it's about that trust building between the community and voluntary sector, about the sharing of data. That was a huge piece of information that was focused on throughout the whole process, because data sharing builds trust. Data sharing encourages us to open more avenues for funding, open more avenues to work with the likes of GP services or primary care. So all of that was looked at, and at the heart of that, it was the best interests of the people that are served within the Moor Ward. The Moor Ward is one of the most deprived areas in the north, if not the UK. And there's a lot of needs that are going unnoticed because there's people that are hard to reach. So that was at the focus of all of this. I proudly sat on the health and wellbeing steering group, and the amount of need within health and wellbeing in our communities in relation to cancer screening, children's oral health, physical wellbeing. It was the figures were stark, and it actually raised alarm bells within the community sector as a whole. But Janet, look, you could go on all day. There was that much talked about. I hope that the information provided the council team there, they can get a good insight into what happened. Some of those comments were completely unfair at the end, I thought. And I just want to make it very clear that processes like this, working with government departments, are for the benefit of the people that we serve, whether you're a community worker or whether you're an elected rep. Nothing should stand in the way of providing a service that's going to make someone's life better. So I just wanted to say that at the end, Janet, and thank you a lot for coming along.
Good. Councillor Hutton. Okay, Janet, if you don't mind, we just have one more indicated speaker, and we'll just hear from Alderman Kerrigan, and then that's us. You can come back in.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'll be very brief. I do thank Janet very much for coming and giving the report today. It's not my area in regards to the Moor, but it's interesting to see the work that's been done and continues to be done, and how it potentially could be brought into other areas across the city and district. And I say any other questions potentially have already been touched upon by other members. So just briefly, thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so Janet, if you want to come back in then.
Yes, thank you very much. I feel I need to pick up again on the point of government's expectations and Mr. Harkin's comments. There is no criticism of the community and voluntary sector in the Moor. Quite the opposite. When I talk about us not seeing the outcomes that we would like to see for the investment that we make, that's not the investment that we make in the community and voluntary sector. The issues I mean there is the fact that unemployment remains higher than we would like it to, for mental health remains a problem. We still need more good quality jobs. We need to be able to get doctor's appointments and a dentist and so on. And I think the opposite of criticism is the case here, because what we recognise is that if we are going to do any of this stuff well, we need to involve the community and voluntary sector in that work, because they are pivotal. And again, I will acknowledge the excellent work that has been done and continues to be done, and our overriding commitment to continue to work with the community to deliver better for the community. Just picking up on some other points, I think there was a number of questions, I think, from Alderman Hussey around what happens next. There are two things really in terms of the learning and the rollout of this. This next phase we anticipate will last a year, and we intend to take that learning and apply that, I suppose, across government in other things. So there are strategies that are coming along around rural development, around community planning within the Department for Communities and so on. And all of this learning will influence those. directly what's going to happen next in terms of the plan is two things. We're going to hope to identify some pilot projects and take those forward, working very closely together with the community and across government, and really see how it works in practice. We're also, across each of those themes contained within the prospectus, going to facilitate conversations with the relevant departments and with the thematic groups that developed the proposals around those. And in that way, I hope that we will pick up not just on the work that we pick as a pilot, but also on all the issues raised, and indeed other issues as well. Just going back to Councillor Donnelly's point about the schools and so on, there has been an offer of engagement from the Department of Education to come and talk to that thematic group and to address any issues at all that they have. And I think that level of engagement, I think, between the community and between government it's been one of the most beneficial things, I think, coming out of this. So we hope that those conversations will continue over the next year alongside some practical examples of working. There was a question around the other pilot areas. So the other pilot areas are North Belfast and Clocker Valley DEA. So Clocker Valley is indeed our rural one, and it's interesting to have that contrast of urban and rural. I listened carefully to Councillor Donnelly's points. Our view and our hope is that the prospectus and the plan and the conversations that have been going on have included all of the community and do embrace the views of everyone. I'll certainly take away and feedback his comments. Just on Councillor Hutton's comments around the community and voluntary sector, we do appreciate the burden that government does place on the community and voluntary sector in terms of how it asks for applications and monitoring of the work that it's done, and different departments make different asks of the community and voluntary sector and measure those outputs in different ways. And that is something that we're looking at through one of those task and finish groups, because we do acknowledge we need to do that better. Culture, arts and leisure, again, that's something as well that is contained within the plan, and we do hope there'll be conversations around each of those areas. There is no new money. It is about working smarter. It is about deciding through joint conversations about what's important, about where there's most benefit, about where government money can go. And in terms of those pilot projects in particular, across the departments, there are significant sums of money already being spent, and the intention would be to spend those in a more collaborative way and to test certain ways of delivering more collaboratively. So there is money already being spent. Well, there is no new money as such, but it's about spending what we have and listening to the community about what they want in those areas and spending that as wisely as we can. I'm hoping that's all the questions. There's quite a few there.
Yep. Thank you very much, Janet, and we do really appreciate you joining us today, and appreciate you waiting for the other deputation to be over. So, yep, that's everything answered in the room. Oh, sorry, Councillor Tierney has one small. I'm timing him. He has 30 seconds.
Thank you, Chair, for your indulgence. It might take me a wee bit longer than 30 seconds. Janet, as I've already outlined, I looked at the prospectus and the plan and was actually quite excited to see the opportunities that this presented for the Moor Ward, the groups and the residents within it. As the presentation has gone on and we have heard time and time again that there is no new money, it is something which for me has certainly burst the bubble. I believe that this is now a process of moving the deck chairs around than actually trying to do something. And I genuinely fear that this process, with no new money being added, is set up to fail before it even begins to get into stage 3 and delivery mode. And has there been any discussions with central government? And I know you've talked about the NICS board a number of times, but is there any talk? Because I believe that the only way to implement this and do it properly is it needs proper resourcing and proper funding within that area and the other 2 areas that have been included. Otherwise, you're only asking the community and voluntary sector to shuffle things about a particular area and see if we get better outcomes. The only way to get better outcomes, Chair, and I'm finishing on this, the only way that I genuinely believe to get better outcomes is to provide the resources and the tools to get people to do that. And in the Moore ward and in other wards across this district, the executive need to fund those initiatives to try. And you opened with it at the beginning of your presentation. They need the tools to try and lift people out of poverty, and moving the deck chairs around in particular areas simply isn't going to work, and it's not a good enough response from the executive. Whilst the prospectus is very exciting, the chances of it working and the outcomes are, in my opinion, damned to fail before they even begin. But thank you again for your presentation here. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Janet, do you want to come back in on that, or?
If I could, please, just briefly. I do appreciate that it is disappointing that there isn't new money for this, but there is money being spent in the areas, and I think there is value in making sure that's spent as wisely as possible and as efficiently as possible, and in a way that the community want us to spend it. I would also say, in the conversations I've had with the anchor organisations and community representatives across each of the pilot areas, is that they have found the process really useful and the engagement with government really useful. And the conversations that are happening now that aren't happening before have had value for them. So whilst I appreciate it's disappointing there's no new money, having that voice and I think working together and making sure we use what we have wisely has very significant value.
Okay, listen, Jenna, thank you very much. And thank you for your time. And we're just going to move into the main body of the meeting now. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, now given that those 2 deputations, important deputations, they lasted a wee bit longer than normal, I'm just going to move ahead instead of stopping. Yeah. So we're just going to move into chairperson's business. Firstly, I would just like to welcome Alderman Kerrigan onto the committee, who's joined us this month. And then I have Councillor Harkin, who has 2 pieces of business.
Thank you, Chair, and Happy New Year, and Happy New Year to everyone as well. The first item is that I wanted to take the opportunity to mention the passing of Dermot Gallagher and send condolences to his partner, Carol, and his children, family and friends. People may have seen that Dermot was buried yesterday at Iskaheen Cemetery. And there was a very moving mass at the Bird Chapel yesterday. Dermot was a teacher at St Bridget's College for many, many years, where he was held in high esteem. He was also an activist in the Irish National Teachers Organisation, INTO, and I knew Dermot from his work as the branch secretary for the Derry Trades Council. He was a brilliant activist. The last thing I remember Dermot doing publicly was giving a speech on the Guildhall steps, representing INTO in August at a Palestine Solidarity demonstration. And Dermot's passing is far too soon. He was a very young person. He had a short illness, and it's been devastating, I know, for a lot of people. But I think it's a huge loss, obviously, to his family. But because of Dermot's contribution as a teacher, his contribution as a trade union activist, and as a campaigner, he's a loss to really everybody. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that today. And I would like to suggest, Chair, if we could send a letter of condolences to Dermot's partner. I think that would be very appreciated from yourself or from the Mayor representing the Council. But I think that this was a devastating loss that a lot of people will feel.
Yeah, no problem, and our condolences to the family, and we will see that that letter is sent, and I think it would be right if it came from the mayor. Okay, on to your second piece then, Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, thank you, Chair. Someday.
No thanks, no thanks.
Yeah, the second one is, look, we all have great hopes for the new year. And one of the things that's happened in the new year is that Donald Trump decided to invade Venezuela, bomb Venezuela, Caracas, kill scores of people, and abduct the president, Maduro, and take him to the United States, where they're holding him now in a jail cell and bringing charges against him. I think that this is a disgraceful act by Trump, and Trump has made very, very clear why he's doing it. It's not because of democracy. It's not because of care for the Venezuelan people. Trump has said very clearly that they're going to take over Venezuela's oil reserves, and Venezuela has the biggest oil reserves of any state in the entire world, and they also have huge mineral resources. So for the American government, this is very much an act of imperial aggression. It is a violation of international law. And I think that the council should take a clear stand on this. So I actually have a short motion here that I'll send to Paula that I hope that we can consider passing today. And the reason why I think it's important that we take a stand on this is because too many international bodies who were exceedingly quick to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine within a day and implement sanctions have refused to condemn what Donald Trump is doing. The British Prime Minister has refused, the Irish government has refused, the EU has refused. So I think it's important that we take a very clear stand that this was a violation of international law, that it is an act of aggression against Venezuela, that the Venezuelan president should be released and returned, and that the US should end its designs to take over Venezuela and impose a war on it.
Councillor Harkin, is this time sensitive? It's just, reminding you of the normal protocols of council, and we didn't get sight of this beforehand. Is this a motion?
Chair, it's a short proposal, and I think that from reading party statements, it seems to me to be in line with what I think a majority of people in this council would agree with. I think that given that there's been such a dire lack of leadership, I think it's important for us to actually say something if we agree on it. The Irish government didn't take a stand on this. They have ignored the issue of what Trump has done and tried to make it about other issues. And Keir Starmer similarly has done the same thing. So in that sense, I think it's important that we take a stand, and I think we should do it as soon as we can. And I know that this is our first meeting back this year. So I think it's important for us to do it as quickly as we can.
I do. I appreciate your sentiments, Councillor Harkin. It's just, you haven't given anybody time to get sight of this beforehand. So if it is coming in as a motion and it's not time sensitive, then I would prefer that it is deferred until full council if it isn't time sensitive.
Well, Chair, I would very much argue it is time sensitive. I think that the quicker that we say something about this will put pressure on the British government, will put pressure on the Irish government, will put pressure on the Stormont executive to take a stand. I think what Trump has done is not just about what's happening in Venezuela. It's about a type of governance where it's not about justice, it's about might is right. And I think we have to indicate that this is wrong. So we need governments that have interests in this area, that have jurisdiction here, to take a much clearer stand than they've done presently. So in that sense, it's absolutely time sensitive.
Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I do appreciate the urgency in relation to what is a very concerning development. But I just want to go back to the procedural point, and I know yourself as Chair. There's the deadline for motions hasn't passed yet. If we discuss this and agree it now, it doesn't expedite anything, because council can't write the letter or act on it until it's ratified at full council anyway. So if discussing it today, agreeing anything today, doesn't make it any way quicker than bringing a motion into full council. So I just wanted to make that point in terms of a procedural thing. Fully appreciate the urgency in relation to it, but we do have processes in place for a reason. Thanks.
Carmel, Councillor Jackson. No, as I said earlier, Councillor Harkin, we do appreciate getting sight of these beforehand and just reminding you of the protocol of council. And I would prefer that if it is going to come back and you are still within that time frame to bring it in as a motion to full council, that would be the preferred route. Councillor Donnelly, were you indicating to speak?
I was, Chair, just about the two things that I know I accept that you're not going to take it as a proposal, but I also think, that we should put on record our opposition to what's happened, and this is alarming, even on the scale of Donald Trump. It's saying if you don't toe the US line, then God knows what's going on. It's not about a rogue president or somebody who's off his trolley. This is very calculated. It's about greed. It's about ideology. It's about capitalism. Venezuela was no threat to the United States. We've seen this action, and we contrast that to his feting and his fawning over Netanyahu, who the International Criminal Court has arrest warrant out for, following investigation of war crimes and crimes against humanity. And I think, this man has torn up every rule book. Every rule in the book is just throwing them aside, and it's a despot. But Chair, I would also like with your indulgence, also agree with Councillor Harkin and send solidarity to the family of Dermot Gallagher, to his wife Carol and his family. I'm sure it's a huge loss for them. His family and his fellow activists and his school family, the teachers and the young people that he was educating. So I would just like to put that on record. Thanks.
Councillor Donnelly and Councillor Tierney.
Chair, thank you. And on the latter point that Councillor Donnelly spoke on there in relation to the passing of Dermot Gallagher, we'll leave the Venezuelan stuff until full council if that's what you're suggesting. But I didn't know Dermot personally, but I do know that he was a very well respected teacher within St. Bridget's College in Cairnhill. And I have seen since his untimely passing lots of current and former pupils, staff members and people connected with the school paying very glowing tributes to a man who they obviously held in very, very high regard. The age of some of the pupils who were paying tribute to a teacher really struck me, and you knew just from reading them that teacher really touched the lives of so many different pupils within our community. As I say, I didn't know him personally, but I joined with colleagues to express our condolences and send our condolences to his wife and family at a very, very difficult time. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Tierney, and I'm not suggesting that we leave the Venezuelan stuff till full council. What I'm suggesting is that we leave a motion until full council.
Sorry, Chair, it wasn't a criticism. I'm just saying I'm not going to discuss it now. We'll wait until full council. It wasn't a criticism in that sense.
Okay, that's us finished with chairperson's business and moving on to matters arising from the open minutes of Governance and Strategic Planning Committee held on Tuesday, the 2nd of December 2025. Does anybody have anything to raise? Okay, so our next agenda items are open for information. Does anybody want to come in on any particular agenda item? I see Alderman Cook wants to come in on agenda item number 10.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in. I would just like to take this time to thank our council officers for their continued hard work on the end of violence against women and girls agenda. This work is vital, and it is crucial that we remain committed to ending all forms of violence against women and girls. I have met with some of the partner organisations involved in the work, and they have raised a number of important points for consideration. These include the need for longer term funding arrangements, such as 3 to 5 year funding cycles rather than a year by year allocation, as many of the organisations plan their programmes and employ staff without certainty over future funding, which creates ongoing challenges for them. They have also highlighted the importance of placing greater emphasis on prevention and on challenging harmful behaviours as well, recognising that domestic abuse is only one aspect of the broader end of violence against women and girls agenda. There is a strong desire for the organisations to continue working more closely as a coordinated network to reduce duplication and maximise impact. And on another note, the presentation that was shared with us today, could that be made more publicly available, just so everyone has a better understanding of the work that has been taking place? So thanks again for all your hard work, and I look forward to seeing the next phase progress. Thank you.
Garmagad Alderman Cook, and we have Councillor Leonard.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to, first of all, place on record our sincere appreciation and thanks to everyone who has in any way contributed to delivering the advice, education and proactive measures mentioned in this progress report in our strive to zero tolerance for violence to women and girls. Everyone agrees that the scourge of violence against women and girls must be eliminated from society if possible. I firmly believe that boys and men are key to achieving this desire, and boys and men of all ages should be encouraged to be included as much as possible in the advice and education events that take place going forward. Very importantly, I would like to also take time to commend all girls and women who come forward to seek help from various agencies. I know that this is not an easy thing to do. To all girls and women, please remember that the only shame is on the perpetrators of coercive control and domestic violence. With this in mind, I would ask consideration is given as to how to encourage more girls and women to seek help and advice in an anonymous way, perhaps, for example, through the delivery of YouTube videos, giving details of women's experiences and stories and how seeking help has improved their situation. The idea being that girls and women can watch it at their own time, anonymously and without going to a public event. Finally, I see there are a number of dates in the report still to be confirmed, and I look forward to the next report to hear how these events have been attended and received. And it may be useful at some stage to compare how these events reflect PSNI and Women's Aid figures with regard to reporting of violence against women and girls.
Councillor Leonard, and we'll bring in Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to officers and to all the community organisations that are doing so much work on this. I agree with what Councillor Leonard has just said there around the gaps there, the ones that are to be confirmed and waiting for the information on it. So I suppose ask when would we get another update, when we'll be here again, because there's loads of really interesting ideas and thoughts there, but it's actually seeing when it's going to be put into action. I agree with, I really firmly believe there needs to be heavy investment on the education for boys and men. The aftercare and supporting women and girls is really, really important, and making the place safe is really, really important, but it's aligned to boys and men. At the end of the day, we know that most of this is perpetrated by men. So we need to be, there are some there, but the majority of these projects aren't for men and boys. So I think if we could be trying to do something from a council perspective to educate boys and men in a way that's meaningful to them, it would be really helpful. And again, I spoke about it last month around the PSNI's role in this as well, and ensuring that that's right from the top down and the bottom up within the PSNI, so people feel safe and they can trust the police whenever they do go to report, because we know unfortunately they don't have great trust on it. So building that kind of trust in the community is really important as well. But no, thank you. I mean, it's a massive report, so you can see all the work's being done, which is brilliant. But I'll say it again, it's sad that we're having to do this in 2026 now. I really pray to God that in 10 years' time, this will not be being talked about anymore, because it'll just be a safe place for women to live. Thank you.
Carmega, Councillor McDade and Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair. And it is an extensive report, and it is good to see that this work is being done, because this is, I think, one of the most important issues that we are dealing with in the north, but across the island and internationally. We have to deal with the scourge of gender-based violence, violence against women and girls, and at all levels. So, look, I think that the executive strategy has been basically to give a relatively small amount of money out to community organisations and ask them to carry forward this strategy, and then to promote the PSNI as an organisation that are serious about fighting misogyny, which I don't believe that they actually are. And I think this is, again, while I'm sure the community organisations are welcome to have the funding, but it is adding more pressure to an already completely overburdened sector, basically saying we want you to carry this out. So I think that there's a lot more that needs to be done. And one thing I would like to have a report on, or some understanding that the council could look at, as well as a discussion about where we're at with relationship and sexuality education, RSE, because in terms of taking the axe to the root, that is absolutely 100% important in terms of getting into the schools, talking to young people, children from a very early age, and young people, to basically undermine and cut through a lot of the misconceptions that people are brought up with, that get normalised, that then underpin the way that people treat each other. So I think that that's, in addition to the work that's being done in terms of awareness raising, I think that RSE is absolutely critical, and I think we have to have a report and an assessment about how that is actually working its way through our schools, and are we actually, there has to be some way of looking at it and saying, what are we viewing success as? How are we viewing, how is this changing people's minds? How is it changing attitudes? And how is it changing ultimately behaviours? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Carmega, Councillor Harkin, and I have no other speakers, so I'm taking it from no indications that nobody else wants to speak on any of the other items that are open for information. No, okay. So can I get a proposer and a seconder to go into confidential, please? Yep, Councillor McDade, Councillor Milley, yep. Okay, that's us. So we have agenda item number 12.